That should be good to go. All right. So today we're talking about HTML. Have you guys heard of HTML before? Anyone not familiar? Does anyone know what HTML stands for? Yeah. Points to Erwin. Hypertext markup language. So it's a markup language, not necessarily a programming language, but HTML is the basis for all web pages. We're going to dive into a little bit of an introduction on that, and then we'll look at translating your wireframes into HTML. We're also going to talk a little bit about semantic tags, which is kind of how we arrange our HTML or how we label our HTML so that it's a lot easier to read. And we'll also talk about indentation, which is super important. Does anyone have Atom already installed? Awesome, cool. If you don't have Atom installed, you can go ahead and do that now. I am going to switch a little bit in between the slides, and I'll do a bit of live coding as well. So if you want to follow along in your editor in Atom, then feel free, but don't feel like you have to. You'll get the video afterwards, and you'll get the slides as well. But if you head on over to atom.io, can download that. And just let me know when everyone's got it downloaded. For those that have got it downloaded, have you had the chance to play around with it a little bit? A little bit? Has anyone used a code editor before? Awesome. What have you used it for? Work.
Getting, like, coding HTML and various things.
Perfect. Cool. Same kind of thing.
Classes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, while you're doing that, so this is the front page. There's a lot of different text editors out there, and after this course, feel free to choose whichever one you want to use. VS Code is good as well, and Sublime Text too. Atom has a nice kind of user interface, and it's pretty easy to get like other features added onto Atom that you find a bit useful. So this is our main page. You can open up my project for today. Don't die on me. There we go. You get the welcome guide every time you come in. A little bit bigger. Cool. So this is my file for the class. Does anyone notice? Can anyone tell me what happens when I stop typing there? What changes? Do that again on the screen.
Oh yeah. The blue dot up at the top of the tab window.
The blue dot. That blue dot is your new best friend. That blue dot tells you that you haven't saved your file. And I can't tell you how many times I've been refreshing a page and going, why isn't this updating? And it's because I haven't saved it. So if you're ever in that situation, just remember to look out for the dot. Otherwise, as soon as I save it, it goes away and it turns into an X, and I can always close the file if I want to. So yeah, your files will be over here. You can open up a folder. You can open up a new file. You can then save it. Today we're making HTML files, so all of our files are going to be with the naming convention .html. So test.html. When we're writing JavaScript, we're going to write .js. When we're writing CSS, it's going to be .css. And that's what lets the program and your browser know what language it is. Handy shortcut, Command S to save. That'll save you time going from, you can do it that way, but if you get the hang of the keyboard shortcuts, that's going to make your life a lot easier. Command C to copy, Command V to paste. I'll throw some more out as I go that are pretty useful. Yeah, all right, so that is, has everyone got Atom now? Cool. All right, so I know you guys talked about, I didn't break that. That would be the exact kind of thing I would do, and that would fall on my head. So you talked about web pages on Monday. Can anyone tell me what the difference is between a website and a web app?
Web app is something you would have on a device like a phone or that sort of thing. It's like a little program.
Definitely. Not necessarily. You might have it on your desktop as well. But yeah, web app is something that you would have on a device for sure. There is kind of a key difference of a website is something that is purely informational. So that is going to be a static page that is only showing information. A web app is going to be dynamic. What we're looking at today is a website. We're going to be creating from our wireframes a website because it's not going to be, I guess, moving. It's not dynamic, but we will be doing the more dynamic stuff later on. And regardless of those changes, both of them use HTML as part of their structure. Here's a wireframe. What shape are you guys seeing a lot of? Squares everywhere. And these are kind of the basis of HTML. Everything is a component or a container in HTML. And this is why it's really good to wireframe, because this makes it super easy to translate this square into a container in HTML. Well, I shouldn't say super easy, but it makes it a lot clearer anyway. So today we're translating our wireframes into what our content is going to be, but we're not translating them into what our website's going to look like. So I don't want to ruin anyone's day, but they're not going to be pretty. That is next week. Next week we're going to start looking at styling and the fun stuff. I mean, this is super fun, but the nice looking stuff. Today they're going to look, my website anyway, is going to look like it's from the 90s. All right. So we talked a little bit about HTML, and HTML is, the purpose of HTML is to give structure to your web page, and it gives context to your content. It doesn't really have anything to do with how the web page actually looks. Like I said, that's going to come a little bit later, but it informs us of what's going on in the web page and what our content involves. I think there's some good metaphors out there. Some people like to think about a house. HTML is like the foundations. It's what you build everything else on. I just got a new bed from IKEA, and I had to spend a whole day putting it together. So I'm thinking of HTML as like a bed frame. And then let's say the mattress is the content, and then your sheets and everything and your pillows are the styling. So that's like the fun stuff that comes later. But the main thing is like the bed frame, and that's what gives context. I mean, it wouldn't work without. I could have a mattress on my floor, but I'd rather not. So this, has anyone seen a tag like this before? Awesome. Do you know what tag this is? Paragraph? Does it say that? No, it doesn't. Okay. Well done. This is a paragraph tag. Every HTML tag will have basically a tag's made up of three parts. You have your opening tag, which is the top P there. You've got your content, which goes inside, and some tags don't necessarily have content that goes in between two tags, but we'll look at that a little bit later. And then you have a closing tag. The closing tag is always using that /. It won't work if it doesn't have the /. There's lots of different types of HTML tags. Like there's so many. Don't feel like you have to memorize them all because nobody does. That's what Google's for. But there's some common ones that we'll go through that are going to be really useful for you. All right. Let me show you some of the other ones that we got. Cool. So this is an H1 tag. This is a text tag. Bear with me a second. There we go. And this is what that text tag looks like. H1 is the first in a series of 7 text tags. These are used for headers, so you can use them for headers and subheaders in your tags, and they basically range in size. So H7 is little. And these are what you would typically use for the title of a web page. We've seen the P tag. This is what you're going to use a lot of for your text. It looks pretty similar. There's a lot of HTML tags that look, I mean, that's pretty much the exact same size. So there's a lot of those tags that look very similar. Another one we'll look at in a minute, well, I'll show you actually now, is strong and M, which is EM for emphasis, and they are visually exactly the same. So why do you think we would have two different ones?
They probably interact with other tags in different ways.
They might do. They might not. There are some that don't interact pretty much exactly the same. I think H7 and paragraph are essentially the same, like related. But it still gives you information for when you're looking at your code. And also, I'll talk about this a fair bit because there's quite a few things that are, when we talk about semantic tags, that this is really important for. There are a lot of people will be using, well, not a lot of people, but some people might be using screen readers to read your web pages. For accessibility, yeah. And it basically, it's the same idea. It's just giving you more context. So something like a paragraph tag is going to make a lot more sense when it's coming through the context of a screen reader than, let's say, an H7 tag if it's like a body of text. similarly with strong, I'll show you that example. M. Oh no, that's the wrong one. It's not emphasis. It was H7 in paragraph. Yeah, emphasis is italicized. The other one. Bear with me. I'll get back to you guys on which one that was, because there's another one that looks exactly the same as strong. But it means, like, strong would mean, let's say, like a title or a subtitle, whereas the other one, which I will find out, is like placing more meaning on that word in a sentence, which is also emphasis. So those are our tags. We also have div tags, and these are containers. Come on, work with me. There. And they are basically like, they're going to be sort of the building blocks. So when we're looking at a wireframe, when we're seeing those squares, those are essentially all going to be divs. But when we look at, actually, yeah, we'll talk about semantic tags. Does anyone know what semantic means? Go for it.
Just has meaning, anything that has meaning or specific meaning to it.
Exactly. So a div is a container, and it's used in web pages all over the place. It doesn't really have meaning. I mean, it means, like, it's a divider, right? It creates a box, but it doesn't have meaning. When you compare it to HTML semantic tags with things like section, article, aside, and again, that comes back to the accessibility as well, because when you're reading that, if you've got a nav bar instead of a div, that's going to make a lot more sense than a whole bunch of divs all over the place. It's called div soup when you see that in code, and there's like divs all over the place. It works. It's not going to crash. It's going to still look exactly the same, but it's going to make your life a lot easier when you're looking back at your code, because you're going to understand. It's good, like, make future you happy with past you, because when you're reading that code, it's going to be a lot more, it's going to read a lot better. All right. Cool. So those are some of the tags that we just looked at. Oh yeah, that's a good one. I'm still getting a hang of this, like, switching between the two. I just want to show you. What do you think is going to happen if I leave out the closing tag there? You're shaking your head. You're just like, no, it's not happening. Yeah, it still shows up. What if I do that here? Wait, I am saving. Why aren't you doing it? Let's just remove that whole thing. There we go. It broke. The other ones. Well, I guess they are just the same text. Yeah, so keep an eye out for that with your code. You always want to make sure you're closing your tags.
That you were able to autocomplete, meaning like you would type the first one in. Is there some setting in Atom that needs to be set up to do that, or?
Yes. Yeah, that is a great question. I use this all the time. Again, you guys talked about how developers are lazy, right? On Monday, that came up. So anything that can make your life easier, use it. This is a package that I installed in Atom. If you go to Atom Preferences and install, it is called autocomplete 8-HTML, and I can send that out in Slack as well. And that's a really handy tool. There's a couple of other ones as well. There's an auto formatter, which I can send out too, and that will help indent your code. And then, yeah, actually, once you've installed that, you can then, if you go to Packages under Settings, it's pretty small. I can't make that any bigger.
What did you say it was called? It was autocomplete HTML.
Autocomplete-HTML.
Which one?
This one here, the not auto close. Oh no, actually,
It looks like
both of them. Autocomplete will complete the word. Auto close will give you that closing tag. So both are really useful. You might already have auto close installed. Is it okay? Yeah. Sorry, yeah. Auto close is the one you want.
This is open source. So people like build these things on Atom and upload them.
Yeah, basically. Pretty much everything. Yeah, all the packages would be open source, so it would be open source code, like on GitHub, and developers would contribute to it. There's lots of tools like that out there, which is really cool. There's it's like a nice developer community where everyone kind of pitches in and to make stuff better, to make it easier for us to be lazy, basically.
Can I ask how you got that window open? Once you type everything, then shows.
Oh yeah, that's actually another extension, and this is when you're doing your wireframes, you'll want to do that. So how to get your HTML file onto the browser, right? Is that what you're asking?
Just to see how it actually comes out. So how you show us is that plain.
You can just, if you have your file in Finder or on your desktop, you can literally drag that and drop it into Chrome, and that will open it up. Or I installed a package in Atom.
Also click the thing in the bottom left, like the file name, and it copies your URL.
Ah, there we go. I don't normally use Atom, so I'm still learning some tricks. Good one, Hillary.
I mean, I read it on Compass.
That's brilliant.
Can't take credit for that one.
There you go. So yeah, you can copy it, or yeah, the package I installed is called Open HTML in Browser, and that means I can right click on it, and it will say, why aren't you letting me? Oh, I guess yeah. Right. Open browser. Any other questions? Feel free, do just shout out at any point in time any questions you have. If I can't answer, yeah.
When you were grabbing the H1 tag and changing it to a 7, was it you were holding like the Option key down to select all the numbers?
To select all, this is one of my absolute favorite keyboard shortcuts, like in the entire world. To select everything, so if I want to select like all the H1s, Command D will select the next one and then the next one, and you could just keep pressing it and that will select all of them. I could do the same with that, if that was the same. Yeah, that's a really handy one. Okay, so we can also nest tags, and actually this is what we're going to be doing like most of the time. I did that a little bit when I showed you the div container with the paragraph inside of it. That's called nesting. And the way we describe it in terms of code is by using parents, children, siblings. So looking at the H1 tag, how would you describe that in relation to the div tag? Child, yeah. If I had another H1 on the next line down, what would that be in relation to the first H1? Let me show you. That's I could just show the code to you. So let's do div. Yeah, so the div is the parent. What would the H6 be in relation to the H1? Sibling. We're not all only children in the room, are we? Yeah, it's a sibling. And yeah, so parent, these are the children and siblings. So this is called basically boilerplate, or it's a template, and this will be our kind of starting code for our web page. This tag, does anyone know what this tag up at the top is for? This basically just says like, hey, I'm HTML. This is what's going to tell your browser that it's an HTML document. The HTML tag next is like the root element that all of your code is going to be wrapped in. And then we have head and body. Head is kind of like the brain of the web page. You're not going to see anything in head apart from this text here. Where do you think it's going to end up? Oh, you can't see it because it's full screen. Yeah, in the top bar. So that's responsible for your title. But apart from that, everything that goes in the head is going to be like behind the scenes doing kind of the thinking for the web page. I don't think we're going to put anything into the head this week. But when we look at JavaScript and CSS, then we're going to have to use that a bit more. And then the body, and that's where everything else goes. That's where the content goes. Does anyone know what this line here is? Comment. Yeah. Comments are really useful in code. Again, this is about being nice to your future self by putting comments in your code. A lot of the time when you go back and look at something from like months ago, and then you have to take that time to remember how you wrote it, when you could save yourself the time by going, hey, this is a comment, this is why I wrote it this way, or this is why this div goes here. Yeah, go ahead.
So that won't appear.
No.
Okay.
So that is invisible to everything apart from the code. That is only for you to see, and it doesn't affect anything either. It has no kind of bearing on the way that the code works. It's purely just, it's like putting a post-it note on your notebook.
Just a quick question about
Yeah,
the first
go
two
for it.
ones. Do you need both of those?
You do.
Okay, it seems
Yeah.
a little redundant, but the computer needs both.
Yeah, it does. I think doctype HTML is from the latest version of HTML. Like when you hear people say HTML5, that, and you know, it's basically just the latest version, and that is like the only thing that came into play. But that's what tells it it's HTML, and then the HTML, because it wraps through the code, that is basically where your code goes. So it's kind of like, this is what it is, here it is.
Okay.
It does seem a bit redundant.
And you have to name the file .html as well.
You do.
So all three to kind
Yeah.
of tell the computer.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The computer's dumb.
Yeah.
You gotta
Just
be
make
like
sure you're very clear.
really clear with it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you gotta do the thinking for the computer. All right. Where'd they go? Oh no, I lost my slides. Sorry guys, bear with me a second.
What exactly ends the comment? Is it 3 dashes and then close parentheses?
2 dashes and a pointy angle bracket.
Gotcha.
Another shortcut, which is really handy, which should work on most machines, Command / will automatically make a comment for you.
Oh, that's nice.
Super helpful. Because depending on what you're working in, whether it's HTML, CSS, JavaScript, the comments are actually, the syntax for them is different. And when I say syntax, I just mean how it's written. But Command / recognizes it for all of them and will make it easier to write a comment. Cool. So this is an example of div tags, which we've looked at a little bit. And these are nested within. This is where we're going to look at the semantic tags that I was talking about. So like I said, this is fine, and this will show up on your web page. But what makes more sense? So here you've got clearly defined header. You've got main and article H3P, which is a lot clearer than looking at a whole bunch of divs. So I'll show you what that looks like. What's on that page? So yeah, so that's going to be kind of your boilerplate. I've jumped a little bit ahead. I've already shown you guys this bit, but this is essentially the boilerplate that you'll use. The head tag is always going to be that top level. There's also a header tag, and those two get confused a lot. So just remember, head is the brain. Header is going to be related to like text and the heading of your web page. So header, you're going to be able to see. Head, you don't see. That's one that might get stuck on. Okay, so now we're going to look at actually translating those wireframes into HTML. So we're going to create this, and when I say create this, it's not going to look like this at all. But we're going to create the tags for the content that's going to go in here starting with the skeleton. So my awesome web page. What's the first thing you think we need?
The outside container or box or
Yeah, for sure. So we've got, like, using our boilerplate as a basis, we've got this nice box here, which we should probably pop in there. I think a section tag is probably a good one for that. I'm a big fan of section tags. Again, it's a container tag, but let's create that. So we've got our awesome web page. And actually, I'm going to take out the article and make a section. All right. We also had a profile picture on there. So within that section, we can add an image. I have a picture of my cat handy, so I'm going to use that. Right, so HTML elements also have things called attributes, and those are any extra information that goes in this tag. An image tag has a source, and that's where it gets the image from. And this is basically the linking for it. We'll look a bit more at attributes next week as well, especially when you get into HTML. And actually, when you're working on the wireframes tonight, they'll come up a little bit. So a tag doesn't have to just be like section, and some of them actually require a little bit more information. Another really important thing for an image tag is alt, and alt basically is text, a text alternative to your image. So again, when we're looking at screen readers, that's going to come up. Otherwise, if the image isn't available, you just get a thing that says image, and that's really unhelpful. This is kind of going off in a little tangent because I said we weren't putting content in here, but I just wanted to show you the image tag. Like a huge cat picture. But like, she's so cute. So I'll take that out for now. Right, back to our wireframe. Okay. Within our container, what else do we need?
Looks like 4 hyperlinks.
Yep. So that seems like it could be a good nav bar. So that's where our links can go. And I'm gonna put in an article for the profile section. So like you can see here, we've got some really different tags, but they look identical on the screen, and that's because we're just adding the context to the content. What else? Button, yep. And I'm going to group that in with the first name, last name, occupation for now. So that's probably another article within. Button.
Sorry, what's an article? Just like a chunk of text?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, basically.
How's it
Chunk of text.
Paragraph?
Article is not a chunk of text. It's a container.
Okay.
So it's like a div, but it would be, so some of the semantic tags, you'd have like an aside, and that would be something like on a newspaper as an aside. Article and section are pretty similar, but it's good to get into the convention of using like section. I always kind of think of as being the bigger wrapper, whereas article can be a little more specific. But yeah, it's a container.
And paragraph is not.
Paragraph is a text tag, so that is specifically related to the text. When I'm saying container, I mean it's like this invisible box, basically, like those rectangles, whereas the text tags are related to the actual text.
Is there someone that would give you breakdown of what would be container ones?
Yes, and I can send that to you on Slack as well. And also, actually, I believe when you're doing your compass exercises, every page has a good breakdown of the ones that you'll be using as well. So that is on Compass. There's also a couple of good resources. I mean, there's going to be quite a few out there, but generally, I want to say MDN, but I'll send it to you in Slack, which is like a breakdown of the tags. Cool. Okay, so we've got basically this box kind of covered. And then what's next? About? And what do you think we need for that? Yeah, for sure. Another container. And what are we going to put inside it? text tags. That's where we can use our text tags. For about, so we've looked at like the H tags. We've looked at P tags. What would you use for about and for this block of text? Yeah, I'd say probably one of the H's. We could go H1, and then this block of text is probably a P tag, a paragraph. So we'll add another, I'm going to say another section, because that's what we've kind of been going with. Well, so now we've got two sections, two kind of clearly defined sections. And we'll go H1, out, and P, and why Yahoo? Go away. Has anyone used lorem ipsum before? Yeah. Does anyone want to explain what it is?
Placeholder text.
Yeah, it's placeholder text. You can get really fun with it. There's like hipster lorem ipsum, which is really fun. And there's lots of different generators on it, but yeah, it's just placeholder text. But so that we can see it. Okay, so now we've got our about section.
Because you put it in P, do you not need to put it in like a text size?
No, so P will have a default text size. You can change that with CSS, like with this sort of styling. So you can tell it what to be, whatever kind of whatever size you want it to be, and that is sorry. A guy just like came and just like ran backwards. Yeah, so it's a default text size, and instead of telling it, instead of saying in here like P B text something, later on you'll be able to just say all of the P tags are this size, or these P tags are this size. So that comes, yeah, when we're talking about CSS a bit more in the styling, but you don't need to because P comes with a default text size. Okay, so that's basically what we've done, is translate those wireframes into this content here. Any other, is that kind of clear? We've talked about HTML, tags, text tags, semantics, so using kind of specific meaning for our text tags. Oh, indentation, that is the last thing I want to talk about. Why do we indent our code?
So it's easier to read.
Yes. Essentially, so it's easier to read. There are some formatters that can do this for you on Atom, but I really encourage you to get in the habit of making sure your code's indented like this. If it's not, it's a lot harder to read. It's harder to see where things are nested. It's also a lot harder to see where like a tag ends. It's purely visual. It's not, HTML isn't something where it's gonna freak out and not work if it's not indented. It'll totally still work. But the more you look at HTML as well, the more intuitive it will be. It's like reading English. We read English from left to right. If someone gave you a book where you had to read from top to bottom, it would take you a lot longer to read. It would still make sense. You could still read it, but again, make your life easier and make sure.
Is there an indentation hotkey?
There
Or you have
is
to download
a
one.
package you can get, and I've set mine up so that it formats on save, which is really handy. So that is Atom Beautify, and that comes with a bunch of other languages as well, but that's super handy. If you download that, you just have to go into the settings and set up find HTML and just click Beautify on save. And so then whenever you save your code, it will indent. Yeah.
The auto closing tags one, I
Yeah.
installed it, but it's not doing it. Do I have to like go into preferences or something to?
Maybe. I can
Okay.
help you with that in a minute
Okay.
if you want. Yeah. I can have a look. Are there any other questions before we wrap up? That's pretty much the lecture side of things. So now you've got the next 2 hours to work on your compass work. Give me a little wave if you have any questions or need any help on anything. And I've got a couple stuff I've said I'll send out, which I will do. Yeah. And you'll get the video as well, assuming I've recorded it correctly. So fingers crossed.